Good morning, class 11. Welcome back. So today we are going to continue our story to build a fire. In the previous class we have done an introduction to the story, right? And we know who the characters are. We'll quickly do a revision of that and then we'll begin the story and its explanation. I hope all of you have found the word meanings. You had one full period to find out the word meanings and everyone should have found the word meanings because this story is an interesting one, but you must know the meanings and familiar with the new words, right? So a quick revision. So we have one main character, that is a man who is out on a trip. Along with him is a dog, and there is a man whom he meets on his journey. This man gives him an advice that please do not venture out because the weather is extremely bad and it is not favorable for any kind of journey. But this man thinks that this fellow old man is a coward and he is an orthodox person, so he neglects this person's advice and he prefers to continue his journey. This fellow is actually not a native of that place. He is very new to that place. He has come there for the first time in the winters, but still he doesn't prefer to give himself some time, analyze, do some research about the weather of that place. He begins his journey, and not only begins his journey, he also tells his friends who were traveling with him that you all take another route, which was a very much traveled route on which people were traveling, and he prefers to take a route on which people were not traveling. So he is inviting trouble for himself. But adventure, people can do anything in the name of adventure, and that is what we have been seeing. We keep reading in the news that this accident happened because of adventure, that happened because of adventure. So people are crazy people, and that's what one of the characters of our story, this man, is. The setting is Alaska region of USA. Okay, it is a very intense cold area, especially when you talk about winters. The temperature can go even minus 50 degrees, 60 degrees, 70 degrees. And what is the freezing point? The freezing point is 0 degrees Celsius, and when the temperature goes below that, 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, it is very intense cold. And imagine the situation going as worse as minus 50 degree temperature, and in that temperature this man will venture on a journey. Let us see what the story has to offer us. The story begins on a day when it was intense cold. The weather was very cold and the day was dark. It was very dark. So let us see. Day had broken, cold and grey, exceedingly cold and grey, and the day had broken. Broken means it started, and the day was dark and it was grey. It was exceedingly cold. Exceedingly means extremely cold, and grey. Grey means dark, no sign of sunlight. When the man turned aside from the main Yukon trail and climbed the high earth bank where a dim and little traveled trail led eastward through the fat spruce timberland. So the man, he turned from the main Yukon trail. He should have been traveling on the Yukon trail. Yukon trail is a 33-mile long passage, right, in the Alaska region, as I told you. So it is a 33-mile long passage in Alaska region in USA, the western part of USA, right? So the story is set around this place. So he should have been traveling on the main Yukon trail on which everyone used to travel. So that was a safe place. But this fellow, he prefers to take another route. He travels on a less traveled, little traveled trail. He says that I will travel on this trail or in this route on which very few people traveled. And it was in the eastward, right? So he traveled in the eastward. His friends with whom he was traveling, they said that we'll travel southward. So the south place, the main Yukon trail, was a good and a safe place. Had he traveled on that place, it was fine. And he also had his friends. So even if he falls in some trouble, his friends can help him. But here he prefers to travel on a little traveled, dark trail which led into the spruce timberland. Spruce timberland means there was a forest. Timberland over here refers to the forest which was full of spruce trees. Spruce trees, they belong to the evergreen coniferous forest trees. They belong to the coniferous family. So there was a forest and then there was a steep bank on which he had to travel. He prefers to take this risky pathway rather than going along his friends. It was a steep bank and he paused for breath. So he traveled and traveled and traveled. He crossed that timberland, that forest, and then he climbed a steep hill. Remember, the weather is intense cold and it is dark. It is very dark. He is traveling. He has traveled a fair amount of distance. He has climbed a steep bank and he paused for breath. And then he would have been tired by now. So he pauses for breath at the top of the hill, excusing the act to himself by looking at his watch. And then he looks at his watch because he wanted to have an idea that in such time or so much of time, how much has he traveled, how many kilometers has he traveled, and how much more he has to travel. So when he looks at his watch, what the time was? 9 o'clock. So when we see in the story, for the first time when he stops, the time is 9 o'clock. But 9 o'clock is a good time of the day, and by 9 o'clock the sun should be out. But it was 9 o'clock and there was no sun. There was no sun, and not even a hint of sun was there. There was no sun already, and there was no sign that the sunlight would be out in the near future on that day. Though there was not a cloud in the sky. But it was not cloudy. It is not that it was cloudy. It was dark. It was dark because it was winters. This happens, and we also experience this kind of weather when we see that for days and days the intense winter is on its peak. We don't have sunlight for a few days. In that situation, the weather looks very negative, right or not? It looks all gloomy and dark. Without it being cloudy, it still looks very dark. So that was the weather there. It was 9 o'clock. No sun was there. No hint of sun was there. And it seemed as if everything was very gloomy. It was a clear day, and yet there seemed an intangible pall over the face of things. It was a clear day, but still it felt as if there was something that intangible means something that cannot be touched. So he says it was clear day, but still it felt as if there was some intangible pall over things. That means it felt as if there was something that was not visible that had covered everything in negativity. So that's what the weather was like. A subtle gloom that had made the day dark. And there was a subtle gloom that made the entire day dark, and it was due to the absence of sun. And why was this? He comes to a conclusion that it was because of the absence of the sun. So sun was not there. Whether this fellow will travel, he'll stop or not, let us see and move forward in the story. It had been days since he had seen the sun, and it is not that the sunlight was not there on that particular day. It has been many days in the past continuously that the sunlight has not been there, and he knew that a few more days must pass before the cheerful orb. The cheerful orb refers to the sun, and he says that he knows also that though it has not been there, the sun has not been there in the past, on that day also it was not there, and in the coming few days also it will not be there. So will he pause? Will he wait for the sunlight to be there to continue his journey? I don't think this fellow will do that. So he knows that the sun is in the southern part and it would take many days for it to be in that area. So he will continue, would just peep above the skyline and dip immediately from the view. So he says, and even if the sunlight will be there, even if the sun would be there, it would only peep out for a few hours and it would immediately vanish. So he is not bothered about sun. He is not bothered about the sunlight, whether it be there, whether it not be there, but he can feel some intangible thing that is taking over that area. The weather is extreme, it is bitterly cold and it is dark. I hope you're connecting with the weather and the situation. The man flung, oh, look back along the way he had come. So now he is standing on a hill, on a steep bank. From there he is looking at the main pathway on which he had come and he should have been traveling. The man flung a look back along the way he had come. The Yukon lay a mile wide and hidden under 3 feet of ice, and the Yukon trail from where he was standing, it looked all covered with ice. Everything was covered with ice. And how many feet of ice? 3 feet of ice. On top of this ice there was 3 feet of snow. So imagine, take yourself in that situation. You are standing on a steep bank. From there you see, and it is everywhere ice is covered, and on the top of the ice there is snow. There's difference between ice and snow. Ice is a permanent freezing of the water, and snow is when the vapor in the environment freezes and comes down in the form of white color. That is snow. So 3 feet of ice upon that 3 feet of snow. That was the situation. The weather was intense. On top of the ice were as many feet of snow. It was all pure white. It was all pure white, rolling in gentle undulation. Undulation means not level, going up and down. So wherever his eyes could see, the place where his vision could reach, it was all white, and he could see up and down of the settlement of this white snow, and the ice, where the ice jams have freezed up, had formed north and south. As far as his eyes could see, it was unbroken white. So beat north, beat south, wherever his eyes could see, it was all unbroken white. It was all white and white and white. And what was this white? This was ice and this snow, save for a dark hairline that curved and twisted from around the spruce covered island, and there was only one dark trail which was left uncovered with the ice. Apart from that, everything was covered with ice, and curved and twisted into the north, where it disappeared, and then that place also disappeared, and that was also covered with ice. So even the pathway was covered with ice, and you could not identify where to travel and where not to travel. And that's why these places can be very dangerous. These places which are covered with ice and snow, they can be dangerous, because you don't know which place can have loose ice, which place can have a strong ice. So if you travel and climb on a place which has loose ice settled, you can go and fall into trapped that. So the place was not very promising, the weather was not very promising, but the man is taking his decisions on his own. Let us see what he does. But he is still waiting at that steep place where he was standing, and he's pondering over, looking at the weather, looking at the environment around him, looking at the situation and assessing it. So let us see what he will do. The dark hairline was the trail, the main trail that led south 500 miles to the Chilkat Pass. Chilkat Pass is a mountain pass, again in the same Alaska region, and that place, and salt water, and that led north 70 miles to Dawson. Dawson is a city in the Canadian territory of Yukon. Dawson is a city, you can write down, Dawson is a city in the Canadian territory of Yukon. So he stopped at that place, at that steep place where he had stopped at 9 o'clock. From there he is giving himself some rest, and he is observing every place around him. So he says that all that place was fully covered with ice. And finally to St. Michael's. St. Michael's is a city in Nom Census area of Alaska. So he says that if you would have gone on this pathway, you could have traveled to the Dawson city, and all that. He is standing there and he is assessing it. Let us move to page number 36. So he stands there, everything is very negative, there is nothing that is promising so far. Whether he'll continue or not, we'll see. But all this, the mysterious far-reaching hairline trail, the absence of sun, so all those mysterious pathways on which he had to travel, those were not very promising. As I told you that these pathways can be dangerous. When it is very clearly mentioned where you have to travel, it's fine, but when everything is covered with ice and snow, you cannot find out where to travel and where not to. It was mysterious, far-reaching hairline. The absence of sun. Hairline, why do we call it? Because it was very narrow. The place where you could travel was very narrow. The absence of sun from the sky, plus the sun was also not there. Third thing that was negative was there was tremendous cold, and the fourth thing that was negative was there was a strangeness and weirdness in the environment. So 4 things are against him. The pathway is very narrow, it's not very promising, it is intensely cold, the sun is not coming out, and there is some strangeness and weirdness in the environment. But will the man prefer to stay? Will he wait for the sunlight to be out there? Will he wait for someone to come Let us see, will all this stop him? All made no impression on the man, and this all made no impression on him. Neither the strange weather, neither the cold weather, neither the lack of sunlight, nothing was impacting him. And why was this happening? It was not because he was long used to this. It is not because he is used to this kind of weather. He is used to this kind of weather, but as I tell you, he was there for the first time. So the place where he has lived, he is native of, that place can have a different kind of a weather. But here he was in a different place. So how is he assessing things? Is he comparing things simply without any logic? So it was not that he was used to it. He was a newcomer in that land. This fellow was a newcomer in that land, but still he's so overconfident, he's so arrogant, he's so bold, we can say, in his decisions, that he's not bothered about anything. Newcomer in the land, a Shikako, and this was his first winter. Shikako is Alaska and northern Canadian area. Okay, so he was there for the first time, and for the first time he was spending his winter in the Alaska region. It is very dangerous. The situation needs proper assessment, but this fellow is simply assessing the situation and he's comparing it to his place and he's traveling. Nothing is bothering him, neither the cold weather, nor the absence of the sun, nor the strangeness in the weather, and neither the weird and mysterious pathway on which he was traveling. So he was quick. The problem with him was the trouble. This is very important line, underline it. This will sum up the entire personality of this man, and it will be helpful when you write your character sketch of this fellow. This is very important line. The trouble with him was, the only problem with that man was that he was a man without imagination. He was a man without imagination. This is a very strong line. We are humans, right? And we all should have imaginative power, and obviously we have. So when do we use our imagination? When you are in a situation. What do you use? You quickly use your brain. Your brain tells you that take this decision, this will be helpful to you, this will be helpful to you, right or not? So we all have that imagination, but the problem this man was that he lacked imagination. It is not that he had some disease or something. It is because he was self-centered person, and he thought that whatever he knows is the best, and apart from him no one knows anything. So he feels that his idea of that place, this Alaska, and his assertion of this place is the best one. So he was a man without imagination, right? He was quick and alert in things of life. He was very quick and alert in things of life. He was not alert in anything else. He was only alert and quick in taking decisions. The significance of that, it is like kar do, jo hoga dekha jayega, that kind of a person. But in such serious and complicated circumstances, this idea and this concept doesn't work. You need proper assessing of the situation. You need to have proper idea of that situation. So the trouble with him was that he was without imagination. He was quick and alert in the things of life, but only in the things and not in the significances. He was not bothered of the significances, and that's what we are seeing here. He knows that the temperature is worse. He knows that the temperature is against him, the weather is against him, situations are against him, but still he is choosing to move forward. Nothing is bothering him. 50 degrees below zero. He also knows that the sunlight has not been there in the past few days. That was not there on that particular day, and it would not be there for a few more days, but still he is traveling. 50 degrees below zero meant 80 odd degrees of frost. What was the temperature? 50 degrees below zero. 0 degrees Celsius is a freezing point. Now minus 50 degrees Celsius, your bones would freeze, they would crackle, they would burst. Such extreme cold it was if you are not very cautious and careful. And it meant 80 degrees of frost. Such fact impressed him as being cold and uncomfortable. But these facts only made him a little cold and uncomfortable, and that was all. Minus 50 degrees, traveling in that situation, it did not bother. It only made him a little uncomfortable, that's all. This was this fellow, and such was his personality. He is not giving importance to anything. And let us move forward and see. And that was all. it did not lead him to meditate upon his frailty as a creature of temperature. We all are creatures of temperature, we humans, and frailty means weakness. So obviously we have weakness, and a person should always know his or her weaknesses and the strength. Now obviously that is our weakness, that we humans can survive in certain temperature only, and that is we have to accept, we cannot change it, right? But here this fellow, for him this concept of we being creatures of temperature was just a kind of condition of weakness, but he did not bother about that. And upon man's frailty in general, able only to live within certain narrow limits of heat and cold, and he was always neglecting this situation, that we have certain limits of heat and cold and we can survive only within that limit. And from there on, it did not lead him to the conjectural field of immortality and man's place in the universe. Conjectural field means touch sensitive, so we all are touch sensitive, but all this did not bother him, and it did not affect him in any way. 50 degrees below zero stood for a bite of frost that hurt and that must be guarded against by the use of mittens, and 50 degrees below zero, it would hurt, it would be bitter cold. And if you are traveling, if you are choosing to travel in this situation, you need to have some gears, some protective gears with you. You need to wear mittens, mittens means gloves. You need to have ear flaps. You need to have warm moccasins. Moccasins are your shoes, and thick socks, and you need to wear thick socks. These are basic essentials that one should have even if you are trying to step out of your house in this kind of a weather. And here this fellow, he was preferring to move out on a journey. 50 degrees below zero was to him just precisely 50 degrees below, that there should be anything more to it, and that was thought that never entered his head. So 50 degrees below zero was merely a temperature for him and nothing else, and even if it was more than that, it did not enter his mind, and he thought, I will never think of this situation. So such is this man. This man is mad. He is not thinking of anything, nothing is intimidating him, nothing can hinder him, and he is continuously moving on his journey. For now, he has stopped, he has traveled a fair amount of distance, he looks all around, what he can see, all he could see was, it was white and unbroken white and nothing else. It was intense cold. Was the sun going to be out? No, it was not going to be out, and neither it would be out in a few days. With whom was he traveling? He was traveling with a dog. Has he traveled a fair amount of distance? We'll see as we move forward. Will he stop there? Will he try to do something with which he can warm himself? Let us see as we move forward in the story. But make sure how much has been taught to you. You read it once more and find the word meanings of the coming few pages. Thank you.